All right, so let's talk about dropping down and closing. By the way, just out of show of hands, how many of you heard Q's talk on Friday? Revolutionary. I've got it recorded, so you guys can. In fact, I'll actually drop it in the chat box if you want, and so you can go back and listen to it again. If you just listen to the mindset. So first of all, one of the biggest things about closing is mindset. And watching that video is absolutely fantastic. It's 31 minutes of gold on some closing mindset stuff. So I'm glad you guys were there for that. Here it is in the chat box. Watch that again. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some nuts and bolts on like how to drop down with the customer. And so specifically like some things to say in your demo that are going to help you transition to different pieces. And we've basically got 25 minutes. So I'm going to try to pack everything I know about dropping down on a simple level into the next 25 minutes. So assuming that you've done a great job, and again, the closing process, by the way, Cherish, doesn't start at the end. A lot of people think that closing starts like when you go to drop down. It definitely doesn't. The best close is a great presentation, and some of you may have heard that before. But the best close is a great presentation. So you want to make it really easy on yourself when it comes to closing the sale. Do a really good job selling them on the pieces in the Homemaker. So here's a couple of tips that you can write down, Rebecca. Here's a great way to build value is one, stick to the manual. So Cherish, that's another way to like just keep it clean and effective is just stick to the manual and ask great questions. In fact, you want to ask a lot of yes questions. So here's some yes questions that you can use in your presentation. And this is specifically on the pieces, but things like just really simple. Isn't that awesome? Wouldn't it be nice to never struggle to cut a blank? Oh, Mrs. Jones, wouldn't it be nice to never struggle to cut a tomato ever again? Have you ever struggled to cut a tomato? Yeah, and it would be amazing, right? You're gonna love that. You're gonna love that trimmer. Mrs. Jones, here's another one for you. Do you ever, sometimes, maybe, ... And you use this on individual pieces. Because sometimes you ask your customers, hey, Mrs. Jones, you ever make a bagel? Because you're getting them excited about the spatula spreader. And they're like, yeah, sometimes. And it's like a negative thing. But if I say, hey, Mrs. Jones, do you ever sometimes maybe make a bagel? And they're like, oh, yeah, sometimes. Right? I reframe that correctly. And if I ask enough yes questions, Dyson, if I say, hey, Mrs. Jones, isn't that paring knife awesome? Oh, wouldn't you use that trimmer? Wouldn't it be nice to never have to struggle to cut a watermelon ever again? Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice to have that butcher knife? Oh my gosh. Wouldn't it be nice never have to buy sliced bread ever again, or whatever the case is, right? Yes, 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 yes. Hey, would you like to go ahead and get a Homemaker set today? Yes. Right? You ask enough, or isn't that guarantee amazing? Yes. Right? Can you see yourself using that piece, Mrs. Jones? Yes. Okay. So that's a huge one. And Dyson, the question I shared with you after your first couple of demos, can you see yourself using that? I'd use that on the Homemaker pieces. Right? So I'm going to, here, Mrs. Jones, here is the paring knife. All right, has a long handle, makes peeling and paring comfortable. Go ahead and click the play button on the video on the right. You'll use this for small jobs in the areas, or small jobs in there like apples, strawberries, and bananas. Can you see yourself using a paring knife, Mrs. Jones? Yes. And if she says no, then I'm going to go back and I'm either going to do one or two things. I'm going to remember like, all right, well, we got to find something with no paring knife as I'm dropping down. Or I'm going to go back and be like, oh, really, Mrs. Jones, you never do this? Well, I sometimes do. Oh, gotcha. Then you use a paring knife for those things. I guess I would. I go back and I make sure that she's sold on that piece before I move to the next one. Cool. Now, sometimes you get to pieces like the butcher knife where like, yeah, we're vegetarians. We probably use those. Oh, Mrs. Jones, so you never cut like acorn, butternut, spaghetti squash, or watermelons or anything like that? Oh, no, you really don't do any big fruits? Cool. Yeah, you really don't need a butcher knife. All right, moving on. All right. Then when I drop down, I know that when they say no to the Homemaker, going to drop to the Galley set. And I already know what I'm dropping down to because I already know what their favorite, most important pieces in their kitchen are. I should be an expert on what they cook in their kitchen by the time I'm done with the names and uses section because I've asked so many good questions. At that point, I can just tell them what they need. And I'm still going to drop down. But when we get to the right set, I'm going to know it, and I'm going to know that, and they're going to know that I know it, and it's going to make sense for them to go ahead and get it. Does everybody follow that? For example, if I have to drop down and pick their 5 favorite pieces, I should already be off the top of my head like, all right, well, I know she needs a trimmer because she said she'd use that all the time. And she says she does, pico and guac all the time. Needs a trimmer. Hey, Mrs. Jones, pick your 5 favorite pieces. I think a trimmer's at the top of the list, right? Oh, yep. That shows her that I'm listening. So when I'm closing, because I did a great job in the first half of the demo, the dropping down process is actually it's not awkward. It's just me helping her find what fits her kitchen needs and her budget. And there's zero awkward, zero pressure. So that's the important concept as we roll into closing. Now let's talk about some nuts and bolts as far as like how to transition from each different set. I'm going to teach you some questions that are going to help you sell more galley sets and starter sets. Because what I've noticed is that in our office, we've sold some homemaker sets, right? Or sold some signature sets. And we've sold a lot of piece orders, but we're not selling a lot of galley sets and starter sets. So I want to give you guys some keys on how to do that. So, first of all, when it comes to the summary, hey, Mrs. Jones, let's review why so many people choose to invest in Cutco. Really emphasizing, hey, Mrs. Jones, you're going to save money by owning Cutco, right? So don't forget to read that, which I'm sure you guys have been, and that's great. And when you drop down and you show the competitors, sometimes representatives actually devalue Cutco, or they like pop the value bubble right before they go to ask for the order. So when you say, hey, Mrs. Jones, the price for this Wusthof set is $3,435, and sometimes you can find it on sale for $2,000, there's some major differences between these brands and Cutco. Sometimes, and that's how you should read it. Sometimes representatives read that and they're like, hey, Mrs. Jones, so price for these German knives is $3,435. But don't worry, Cutco's not that much. You actually want the customer, you want the value built to a point where like customers are like, dang, am I going to have to refinance my house to buy a paring knife? Right? Because you're so confident with the close and you're so confident sharing the numbers with them. Like, hey, Mrs. Jones, Wustof's $3,435. Sometimes you can find it on sale for $2,000, but there's some major differences between these brands and Cutco. And with all those differences, you're looking at over $4,000 for a set of Cutco. Right? By the way, just so you know, if we sold Cutco in stores, we could sell Cutco for $3,000 to $4,000 pretty handily. American made, are you kidding me? And forever guaranteed. With the middleman markup, that's what we'd sell for, and we could sell for that, and people would buy it. In fact, I think Cutco should be more expensive. You want to know why? Because we could sell it for more. Do you know what determines the price of a product in the market? What customers will pay for it. That's what car dealerships will mark cars up past, $10,000 above like MSRP or retail. Why? Because people will buy it, especially when there's a demand, right? So if you build the value high enough, they should be like, oh my gosh, wow, it's going to, I don't think we're going to be able to buy anything today just based on what you're telling me about value. And then when you drop the price on them, that it's $1,419, $309, they're like, huh? Oh. And remember, you're saying at $1,419 and $309, Wusthof and Henkel's is $3,435. And another quick key that sometimes people forget when it comes to closing is they forget to have the customers write down the prices. In fact, I just want to ask out of curiosity, and it's okay. We've all forgot this. How many of you have forgotten to have a customer write down the prices? It's the number one single thing you can do to help your to increase your closing percentage is make sure that they have the prices in front of them. Because if they don't, they won't be able to weigh the price versus the value. They need to know exactly what they're paying versus what they're spending. So it's a really important concept. So you really want to get in the habit of making sure that they have a pen and paper in front of them. Or if you're doing a demo over Zoom, Kirsten, you can pull up the whiteboard feature and write on the whiteboard, or you can drop the price in the chat box, right? Homemaker, $1,419. I always, by the way, when you write the price down for the customer, never put commas in it. I just make things bigger. I never put dollar signs. I just Homemaker +8, $1,419, 1419, arrow 309. If you want to put in parentheses at 5MO for 5 months, then that's great too. Another quick tip when it comes to the closing is you really got to paint the vision and clarify what the customers are getting for what. So I would say, hey, Mrs. Jones, we have a bonus where if you buy this, where if you buy now, I can give you the entire kitchen tool set, the entertainer pack with those 4 popular gadgets, or a pair of super shears for free. Now pause. Some of you may remember this for training. Some of you never taught this. I always ask the customer right here, hey, if you were to get it, Mrs. Jones, real quick, like what would you want for free? Kitchen tools, entertainer pack, or super shears? You'd want the super shears? Awesome. Well, Mrs. Jones, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you, would you like to try out the Homemaker set today and get your super shears for free. Got to paint that vision for it, right? And then you're going to zip it. One of the things that representatives oftentimes do is they forget to shut up. They keep talking after they ask for the order. A very quick story. I did an appointment for years ago. After I ran a branch office down here in Southern Utah, I called some old customers up, did an appointment for a guy named Tony and his wife, and he owns Dixie Direct, which is a like a coupon book company down here in Southern Utah, and all the football like fundraisers or whatever, they sell these like coupon catalogs. Anybody seen those? So think of like Starving Student Card, but like if Dixie Direct was like the Starving Student Company. And they still sell Starving Student cards down here too, but Dixie Direct's pretty big for fundraisers. So he's a professional salesperson. He's literally worked in sales his entire life. And doing an appointment, I'm actually sharpening his wife's Cutco. We make a wish list, and he wasn't paying any attention to me. He's like, "Hi, cool, whatever, you're here, I'm working." And he's on his laptop doing work in the corner, not paying attention. I'm working with his wife. And we're going through, we make a wish list. I show her what the total price is, what I can do for a discount. Here's what it is on the 5-pay. How does that sound, Mrs. Jones? And then I zipped it. So I said, how does that sound? And she's looking at the price or whatever. And like, as she keeps looking at it and the silence goes on, I hear clickety, clickety, click. And then like Tony pauses, hasn't said a word to me the entire time since I walked into his kitchen. He's over at the kitchen table and he looks up. And his wife is like, "I don't know, Tony, what do you think? Do we get these? Do we not?" And he's like, "Did you just see what he did?" She's like, "Yeah, he's trying to sell me a bunch of knives." And he's like, No. Did you just see what he did? He asked you for the sale and then he shut up. Insert 4-letter word. And he said he shut up. He said, "I've worked in sales a long time. 90% of salespeople blow the sale at this point." And his wife is like, yeah, but whatever. But he keeps talking back and forth to her. And he's like, "Look, he still hasn't said anything." And I'm like pretending that I don't know what's going on. I'm just like, cleaning some like dishes and tidying up my knives. And he's like, "See, he still hasn't said anything." Anyway, and they ended up buying like a smaller wish list. But it's because you got to zip it. And sometimes representatives are, they're like, do you want to get the Homemaker? "Oh, you don't have to if you don't want to. It's really okay." And then they like trail off and they just destroy the confidence. And in confidence in the product and in the fact customers are going to love it is such a huge thing. Now, here's another quick thing. Sometimes representatives skip the knee-jerk reactions, right? By the way, you can slowly raise your hand if you've ever skipped the knee-jerk reaction and just like drop down because you're afraid to read it. Anybody ever done that? I've done that before, by the way. Showed a customer and they're like, "Oh, we can't afford it." Instead of saying like, "Oh, I completely understand, 1419 is a lot all at once. That's why most people split it up over 5 months. It'd only be 309. How does that sound?" Instead of saying that like a confident human being, I went, "Okay. Here's our Galley set." And then I just like, I panicked and I dropped down. I'm going to tell you this, 50% of the homemakers you ever sell in your career are going to be because you asked the first time, "Do you want to get the Homemaker?" The other 50% of the homemakers you sell Dyson in your career can be because you handled the knee-jerk reaction. Kirsten, what happened this morning when you sold a Homemaker? She said what?
She said she needed to talk to her spouse, and I literally read that word for word, and she's like, "Okay, I guess we can do that." My mind was blown.
And Kirsten sold a Homemaker set this morning because she read the knee-jerk reaction. So don't forget to do that. Now, it's not always going to work. In fact, the other 90% of the time it's not going to work, but that's okay. Now, it's really important to understand a couple things here as we get ready to transition from the Homemaker set to the Galley set. First of all, we need to know what the actual objection was. Q talked about smokescreen objections, right? We need to know what the actual objection was. And in most cases, it is either too many pieces or too much for the budget. So if somebody says, "Hey, I can't afford that," yes, awesome. I love Dyson hearing people tell me they can't afford it. "Hey, I can't afford that." Because you know what I can't afford that means, Rebecca? If I had the money, this wouldn't be a conversation. But I'm on a budget. And so I can't afford it is not a no. I can't afford it just means, hey, if I find them something they can't afford, they're going to get it. Does everybody understand that? So I love hearing I can't afford it. That just means I need to show them a 5-pay option, repeat the 5-pay option. That just means I need to drop down a smaller set, help them pick some pieces. I can't afford it is awesome, because that means, yes, I love Cutco. It's just that option, that particular option of the Homemaker set that you showed me does not work for my budget. Easy. 90% of the people say the same thing, and we sell tons of other stuff, right? So that's a really important concept to remember. Now, if somebody ever tells you it's too expensive, oh, that's too expensive. That just means, Isabel, if I had the money, I wouldn't pay for it. Just like how, I've used the example. I'm a car guy. I love cars, but even if I had a couple $1 million lying around, a Bugatti Veyron probably would be too expensive for me, because it's a $2.3 million car. Even if I had the money, I wouldn't buy it. I'd probably settle with a Ferrari or a Lamborghini for like $500,000, right? Because it's too much money for that car. That's too expensive for me to justify the price, even if I had, if I was disgustingly rich. If somebody says or it's too expensive, that means you failed the first half of the demo in building the value for the customer. Now, when they tell you can't afford it, that just means you need to help them find something they can't afford. Now, if they say, you know what, that's just too many pieces, perfect. You know what I love about hearing I can't afford it, or that's too many pieces? The Galley set solves both of those problems. So you need to start looking at the next set as the solution to the current problem that they have. Does that make sense, Cherish? It's too many pieces? Awesome. Let me show you. Our Galley set, it actually has less pieces. Or if they're like, oh, that Homemaker set's just too much for budget. Mrs. Jones, can I show you a set that I think could be better for you because it's actually better on the budget? And they're like, oh, yeah, you totally can. Sure. Probably not going to buy it. They'll tell you that multiple times, but that's fine. And it's really important that when you're dropping down, here's a quick tip before I give you some more nuts and bolts. You always need to operate under two assumptions in your presentation. One, that customers are closer to buying than you think they are. Write that down. Customers are closer to buying than you think they are. Always. The customers are always closer to buying than you think they are. And the sale is always lost in the rep's mind before it's lost in the customer's mind. You will always be sold on the fact that they're not going to buy anything long before they're sold on the fact that they're not going to buy anything. Even with objections, even with all the smoke screen objections, whatever that they're telling you, the sale is always lost in the rep's mind before it's lost in the customers, and customers are always closer to buying than you think they are. So it's important that you don't let the customers plant these seeds in your brain of doubt on your drop down. And Cherish, they're really good at doing that, right? Oh my gosh, we just paid $30,000 to remodel our kitchen. We spent way more money than we should have. And well, hey, apparently you have a habit, Mrs. Jones. Why break it now? Right? And so it's like, or Mrs. Jones, if your kitchen remodel would have cost you $30,114 and $19, like $31,419, would you have not done the kitchen remodel? Would you done it? Now, I don't necessarily say those things, but my internal dialogue is saying that. Does that make sense? Now, if I have a good enough rapport, by the way, you can, with rapport and a smile, you can say anything. I've done in-home appointments where I've had such great rapport with the customer. I looked down when their dog walked in. I went, Mrs. Jones, that is the ugliest dog I've ever seen. And she's like, yeah, he's pretty nappy looking, isn't he? Right. And it's just because I've got rapport, right? That could potentially be rude, but we had such a great connection with the customer that wasn't a big deal. So, and it's not that I was trying to be mean or anything. It was just, we're on the same page, right? So it's really important that when you're dropping down, customers are going to try to plant little seeds of disbelief of why they can't buy Cutco. Don't let them grow. Don't let those little seeds plant and root in your brain, because then you're like, oh my gosh, they're not going to buy anything. Yes, they are. No, they're not. Yes, they are. Yeah, no, they're not. Yes, they are. I got to drop down anyway. Right. And then that's the battle that you're having on the drop down. How many of you have had that before? All right. So you felt that. Yeah. So just bad seed, Mrs. Jones. In fact, you could say that out loud in your demo, right? If they're like, oh yeah, we're not going to buy anything. We just spent a bunch of money on our son's mission, right? He's going into the MTCL on the 23rd. And I don't know, Jesse, missions are expensive. So yeah, we can't afford anything today. Bad seed. And they're like, what? Oh, you just move on. Here's another phrase for you to get you off the hook. Oh, really? Okay. Then you move on and pretend like nothing happened. They could be like, oh, you know what, Isabel? I think the knives are way too sharp. I'd probably lose a finger. I don't like sharp knives. Oh, really? Okay. Continuing with my demo the rest of the same way I would have no matter what. But don't let those little bad seeds plant in your brain. All right. Now you're helping the customer. So let me give you a couple keys on how to transition from a Homemaker to the Galley set. Has anybody ever had a customer say, yeah, we really want Cutco Dyson, but if we're going to buy anything, we're just going to buy that Homemaker set that you showed us, right? And you're dropping down and they're like, oh, I'd just buy the Homemaker, later. We'll just buy that Homemaker later. So if you've had that before, it means you've done a really good job building value on the Homemaker, but you did too good of a job building value on the Homemaker. So sometimes what you have to do is you actually have to sell them off of the previous option to allow you to drop down. What's better for the customer, to maybe buy a Homemaker set a week, 2 months, 2 years from now, whatever, or to use a couple pieces in their kitchen every single day that they can afford? They're going to get way more value out of those pieces. So it's important to maintain that mindset. So, hey, Mrs. Jones, so when you drop down from the Homemaker to the Galley, sometimes you have to sell them off of the Homemaker. Now, if you remember from training, the difference between the Homemaker and the Galley set, hang on, let me click out of the other thing here. The difference between a Homemaker set and a Galley set, you guys can still see the slides or like the manual. All right, cool. Is a butcher knife and a master carving set and 2 table knives, right? So write these questions down. Mrs. Jones, do you carve a turkey every day? And this is right before you transition into the Galley set. You carve a turkey every day. So they say, oh no, Dyson, we can't get that Homemaker set today. We just can't afford 309. We've got X, Y, and Z going on. Hey, no worries, Mrs. Jones. Let me ask you this. Do you carve a turkey every day? What do you think most people say? No. I'd be very surprised if they said yes. And if they did, sell them a Galley set and bonus the master carving set for free. You can do that, by the way. That's legal. And then you're going to ask them, do you cut heavy duty stuff all the time? Heavy duty stuff all the time? And the answer is going to be no. And then you're going to go, oh, well, Mrs. Jones, you don't need that master carving set and you don't need that butcher knife, right? Would those pieces be nice to have as part of the set? Of course they would. That's why it's in the Homemaker set, the most popular set that we sell, but it's not a need. At this point, you're trimming off of the less useful pieces for that individual person. And for 99% of the population, that's the master carving set and the butcher knife. So, oh, Mrs. Jones, if you wouldn't carve a turkey every day and you don't cut heavy duty stuff all the time, we actually have this Galley set that I think would be perfect for you. Go and click on the next slide. It's a perfect starter set. It'll take care of all your needs. It's a few less knives for a lot less money. Now, can I give you a little tip? I don't think I've given this tip to even Kirsten or Isabel already. When you're comparing, you'll notice that before we showed the competitors to Cutco, and then we priced out the Homemaker. Wusthof, $3,435. Homemaker set, $1,419. Now, as you're dropping down, you're comparing everything back to the Homemaker. If you do this the right way, Isabel, you'll never run into the objection of, well, we'll just buy a Homemaker set later on. Here's what you do. You go, hey, Mrs. Jones, it's a few less knives for a lot less money. And then what you do is you make the Homemaker set the bad guy. You say, instead of paying $1,419 for the Homemaker set, that Galley plus 6, that's only $1,024. Mrs. Jones, that's only $224 per month, baby. And you never have to, and by the way, if you can find a way to throw a baby in there with how excited you are, that's only $1,024, baby. And, and $224 per month. I'm out of practice, right? But you want to make sure that you're sharing it with that kind of enthusiasm so that they're like, yeah, that Galley set is better than the Homemakers. I don't need to pay $1,419, $1,024, $224 per month, $56 a week. Guys, I'm pretty good at not going out to eat, but I'm pretty sure that I spend, I easily could spend $56 a week on some burritos and some gas station food and travel. $56 a week is like nothing for an HM3. Oh, Mrs. Jones, and if you get this set today, I can still give you the Kitchen Tools Entertainer Pack Super Shears for free. I gathered you'd probably want the Super Shears. Yeah, awesome. Hey, you're gonna love your Cutco. Would you like to go ahead and get the Galley set with your Super Shears for free today? Now, here's your mechanical thing. Make sure, by the way, you can always go back and handle the knee-jerk reactions and just insert Galley set or starter set in here, right? That template is a really important thing. Also, go back to Q's message on how to handle objections. He gives you the structure on how to do that for anything. But in the last 60 seconds, and we can pick up on another meeting with this on how to drop down to the other ones. Let's talk about the starter sets really quick. With the starter sets, there are 2.5 questions you want to ask during the starter sets. Ready? So on the Galley set, you're going to say, hey, Mrs. Jones, they say the Galley sets and you handle the objections, you offer more free stuff, you do the Galley set on the trade-in special, which you guys learned, or the secret weapon, which you guys learned in advanced training, how to discount it with the table knives. You show those different options to help find the right deal. She still says no, then you're going to say this. And it's very important you phrase this question correctly. What one piece would you use the least? Write that down from the Galley set. What one piece would you use the least? Would you want a block or a tray? And you'd use the table knives, right? That's a half question. You smile and nod. Miss Jones, what one piece would you use the least? Would you use a block or a tray? And you use the table knives, right? Now, here's the way this works out for you. Check this out. Let's pretend that the customer said, well, I would use the slicer the least. I want a block. And yeah, to the table knives. Okay, cool. When I'm going down to the starter sets, I'm going to look through these and I'm going to wait a second. Block, no slicer, table knives. Oh, Mrs. Jones, we actually have this essentials +5. If you click through the slides, you'll see that that's the one that matches up with what you said. And instead of because here's the thing, when you're dropping down, instead of being like, here's the essentials +5, here's what's in this, here's the studio +4, here's what's in this, here's the space saver, here's what's in this. By the time you get to the space saver, they forgot what the heck the first and the second one were, right? And then you get to the gourmet set and they're like, I don't know, pictures, right? But if I say, hey, what one piece would you use the least? Would you use a block or a tray? And you'd use the table knives, right? Well, if they say they wouldn't use the slicer, great. Oh, Mrs. Jones, we actually have this essentials +5, doesn't have the slicer, comes in a block, and comes with table knives. Instead of paying, and you compare it back to the Homemaker. This isn't in the script, but this is like a really powerful tip for you. Instead of paying $1,419 for the Homemaker set, Mrs. Jones, the essentials +5 is only $799. That's only $163 on the 5-pay. Go ahead and write that down. It's only $41 a week. Oh, Mrs. Jones. And if you get this set today, you can still have the super shears for free. Is that something you'd be interested in getting today? Fireworks go off, because if they were even on the fence on the Homemaker and they were flirting with the idea of a Galley set, $799 is like almost half the price of a Homemaker set. And they're getting the super shears for free. They're stoked about that, right? Now let's do one or two other examples. Let's say they're like, well, so if I go, hey, what one piece would you use the least out of the Galley set? They're like, I wouldn't use the fork. Okay, block or tray. Use the table knives? No table knives. Okay. Well, hey, Mrs. Jones, let's see. No fork, tray. Well, that's kitchenette that has a fork. Oh, all knife set. Oh, hey, Mrs. Jones, we actually make a set that's perfect for that. So it comes with in a tray, no fork, and no table knives. Hey, Mrs. Jones, instead of paying $1,419 for the Homemaker set, that all knife set's only $555. That's only $114 on the 5-pay. You never have to buy knives ever again. By the way, insert that phrase, and you never have to buy knives again. And you never have to buy knives again, Mrs. Jones, and I can give you the super shears for free. Is that something you'd be interested in getting today? Anytime you close, I just love throwing in, you never have to buy knives ever again. Just like adding a dash of salt to like your cookie recipe. Needs a little bit. Now, what if they say they want a tray and table knives? Okay, well, did you know instead of giving the super shears, you could bonus a tray of table knives for free? The 4-pack of table knives, if they want a starter set, like an all knife set. Because on special number 1, if you remember, is to pick your 5 favorite pieces and get a pair of super shears or 4 table knives for free. You just give the 4 table knives for free on the all knife set. You can call it the all knife +4. Look at this, the all knife +4. The Homemaker set has 10 pieces, 8 table knives. If they buy an all knife set and you give them 4 table knives for free, they are getting 5 pieces and 4 table knives for free. That's half a Homemaker. And what does that cost them? $555. Not 700, not 800, $555, and it's $114 on a 5-pay, $29 a week. You guys could afford that if you watched your Chick-fil-A purchases. There's no reason why any customer out there couldn't buy a set of 5 knives and get 4 table knives for free. By the way, it comes out to be 350, 400 CPO order. If you're closing on those orders often and excited and helping the customer get the option that fits them, game over. 2-3 orders, you sell $1,000. Week in, week out, every week of the semester, Rebecca. And some weeks you sell a Homemaker, some weeks you sell a can opener. But if you're consistently closing on starter sets, you're going to be hitting a ton of pay raises. and winning a ton of prizes in your fast start. You're going to be, consistently hitting numbers that are going to help you win scholarships, and it puts you in a really good situation. So that is dropping down 101, and my computer decided to blank out on me. So if you can still hear me, you are welcome to bounce.
We
Thank
can
you
hear
for-
you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, my computer's frozen, and that's okay. This is probably Zoom's gonna kick me out, but you guys are good to go. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you guys, and cheers. Go crush it on your next appointment.